Have always have this kind of brother sister cousin relationship. So whenever we collaborate together, it's something that I'm really proud about. Today's topic is actually something that is I really enjoy and is close to my heart, as especially as a black man. In my culture, mental health is not something that's talked about very well, and so it's a topic that I will like everyone um, to be really involved in and to really listen and hear experts talk about what they've been doing in their field. Today we have, like Kim said, we have Gabby and Eric and Vanessa to kind of share what they're doing and for Eric specifically to share his story and his journey being an Asian American man, male, on this campus, and his journey through mental health concerns and what led him to start what is now the mental health club on our campus. So we're super excited to have both of them here. And I'm gonna hand it over. Actually, before I hand him over, there is a statistics here that I really wanted to share. On our campus here, between 2019 and 2020 school year, which we all know is abbreviated, there was about 384 clients that were served in the wellness center here on our campus, and 16% of those were Caucasian, which means there's a lot more people of color right here on this campus that are using the wellness center, and that number really made me a little happy because it made me feel like people are slowly beginning to get it that mental health is a real issue on our campus and in the world. So I'm so excited to hand over to the experts today. So yeah, I'm gonna hand over to my colleague and the person I work with, sort of my right hand woman, Bella Passy, to take it away. So go Bella.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. As Sam mentioned, I'm Bella. I work as the Mosaic liaison in our office. I get to work with all of our Mosaic clubs and do a variety of things. And I'm so excited to be here today to help facilitate this conversation. I want to introduce our amazing panelists and kind of give a little bit of info on them, and then we're going to watch a quick video and get into a really amazing conversation. So to introduce Eric, Eric is a recent Point Loma Nazarene graduate. He works now as a manufacturing engineer at Solar Turbines. He has a passion for mental health, which led him to actually be one of the founders of the Mental Health Club at Point Loma Nazarene University, and we are so excited for him to be here today with us. Someone else we have with us is Gabby Masuda. Gabby is also a PLNU graduate and is the outreach coordinator and mental health educator for Jewish Family Services program, Breaking Down Barriers. And then we have one more, Vanessa, and I'm actually going to let Gabby introduce Vanessa for us.
Hi everyone, I'm so excited to be here. I actually used to intern for Kim at Center for Justice when I was at Point Loma, so I'm really excited to be here and be in this space. Yeah, I just love to introduce my colleague and coworker, Vanessa. Vanessa is also an outreach coordinator for Jewish Family Services with our program Breaking Down Barriers, and we're so happy to be here to share about mental health today.
Awesome. Thank you, Gabby. So now we're going to just share a quick video. It's about a 7-minute video with you guys, and then we're going to get into a presentation.
If I have a panic attack, it works slowly.
Sometimes it's really hard to get out my bed in the morning.
It's very physical for me. It starts like in my chest, and then I kind of get short of breath maybe. I get the chills a lot.
Usually it starts with like obsessive thoughts.
You can't think about anything else. You can't get it out of your head.
I can't like sit down, like I keep pacing around.
It could be hard for me to hear things. It's hard for me to listen or understand.
Debilitating and I can't function.
I have to push myself to just be like, okay, I have something to do, so I just can't let this beat me. Not today.
A lot of my anxiety stems from OCD, I think. It'll be stress related to school or internships or relationships with my friends.
My anxiety comes from like test anxiety and also social anxiety, being around a really large number of people.
The act of just sitting and doing nothing makes me very anxious. On the opposite side of the spectrum, if there's too much going on. So during finals week, and I'm trying to work like 20 hours a week, and I also have to study, and I have to do my homework, and I'm an RA back at campus. So if there's too much going on, and I am having trouble sorting it in my brain.
I had this dream to be in film, to be in entertainment TV, and I got here and it just seemed more impractical, and the biggest trigger for anxiety now is thinking about how undeveloped my idea of the future is.
Last minute things make it worse. I'm a planner by nature, I plan everything.
But a lot of times there is no cause. I'll just experience like a constant state of anxiety that can last for over a week.
I call somebody, call my mom, or call one of my friends, or I just kind of sit and breathe, take some deep breaths.
So the best thing for me to do is if I feel even a little bit of anxiety bubbling, I step out of the room, I say, this is what my therapist taught me. You just kind of have to say, this is the anxiety I'm feeling. My anxiety is at a 3 out of 10 right now. And once you say that to yourself and you recognize that that's the anxiety level that you're at, you can start to lower it back down.
I tried to teach myself to support me like somebody else would, to look at my situation from the best exterior angle I could.
Most recently this semester, I did have to drop a class because it was too much for me and I had been missing a lot of class.
Recently I started like writing out what is actually going on, and 9 times out of 10 when I see it in front of me, it's not even that big of an issue.
Sometimes I have to force myself to be social. At first it may like really get to me, but at the end when I'm like, okay, I was able to sit at a lunch table with a group of people and talk to them, like that's like big things for me.
Think positively, give myself encouragement, tell myself it was okay. If I ever felt like I was overwhelmed, I had to tell myself that I could handle it and that I didn't need anybody to hold my hand.
I usually just try to like talk it out with the people around me, but that can often be hard to do because you don't always want to feel like you're that person who's burdening everyone else with like your constant anxiety attacks.
Sometimes when students skip class, it doesn't mean that they just don't want to be there. Sometimes they just need a day or they just need a couple hours just to chill.
But I think the most important thing is that like a lot of times I'll get the assignment to you, it's just gonna take me a little bit longer.
I would like them to just know that I'm not that shy student that doesn't want to talk. I'm also not coming to class because I don't want to learn or I'm not serious about my education. But sometimes it's physically hard to just deal with certain things. So I'm not that kid that's gonna waste my money and not show up to class, but sometimes it is hard.
I think the faculty is very understanding about the pressures that that college kids are having. They can empathize with the students.
I don't particularly feel comfortable speaking to my professors about taking a mental health day from class. And so that's why I think it's really important to normalize this conversation around taking a day off for your mental health just as you would for your physical health.
My school is like very activist heavy. So a lot of times they'll be like, well, we need to like reduce the stigma around mental health, and they'll say that, but there's also a culture, I think, because the job market is so competitive that like you need to have 3 internships a semester and work a job because school is so expensive and take a full class load. So if you're doing less than the person next to you, a lot of times you're just seen as competition and they'll like look down on you a little bit.
I can only speak from my experience as a Black student, especially as a Black female. We sometimes have to convince ourselves that we're not crazy. There's nothing crazy about dealing with anxiety, depression, whatever's going on. It's actually a lot more common than you think it is.
What my anxiety is like is not what everyone's anxiety is like.
That I'm not mean, I'm not antisocial, I'm not stuck up or anything. I'm very nice. It takes me a minute to get used to people. If I don't feel comfortable in a situation or in an environment, I will remove myself from it.
I really try not to show any anxiety in public. A lot of people tell me that they see me as a laid-back person, and I go, really? You think that? It's interesting.
There is no sort of logic behind anxiety, so it's always there, but you like telling me, oh, well, you don't have to be stressed because in the long run, it's not really gonna matter. Sometimes I just need someone to like sit there and, you know, just be there while I, you know, freak out a little bit.
If you're even questioning if you're struggling with anxiety, you should just go in and see somebody. Because if it turns out that you're not and it's just regular student residual stress, that's fine, you can get that managed there too. But if it turns out to be a bigger problem, now's the time to seek help instead of waiting until it's debilitating.
Great. So after that video, I'm going to turn it over now to Gabby and Vanessa, and they're going to give us a presentation. And after that, we're going to go into a Q&A.
Amazing. Okay, I'm going to just share my screen. Okay. Awesome. Thanks again for having us here today. We're going to be talking about self-care and community care, specifically focusing on BIPOC students, which stands, if you don't know what BIPOC stands for, it stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color. So before I get started, I just want to do a little land acknowledgement. So we want to acknowledge that we are respectfully on the land of the Kumeyaay people, which we now recognize as San Diego, and they have lived in this region for over 10,000 years, and we are very grateful for the opportunity to live and work in their homelands. And if you want to find out more, I know that there are some people remote right now, so if you want to find out more about whose land that you are on, you can go to the website at the bottom of the slide.
And so our program is a program of Jewish Family Service, and it's also funded by the County of San Diego Health and Human Services Agency. And JFS is one of the largest and oldest nonprofits here in San Diego. And you know, we do everything from food pantries to helping seniors receive services. So yeah, we're just really grateful to be here with you all today.
This is our amazing team. We are strictly an educational program, so we aren't licensed therapists. We just talk about mental health from an educational perspective in order to destigmatize mental wellness in our communities. And so starting from the top left, we have Marcia, and she specifically works with and focuses on Indigenous and Native American communities. And then going to your right, you have Michelle. She works specifically with the African American community. And then to your right, we have Noon. She focuses on the African refugee community. We actually are, Fernanda moved on to another position, so we're actually looking currently for a Latinx coordinator. If you know anyone who would like to apply, you can afterwards. But then moving down, we have Vanessa, who's here with us today. She specifically works with the LGBTQ plus community. And then to your right, we have Lily, who focuses on the Middle Eastern community. And then myself, who focuses on the Asian and Pacific Islander community. So a little bit more about myself. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am 4th generation Japanese American, which means Yonsei in Japanese. That's a lot of the lens that I come from in terms of mental health. I have my degree in psychology, and I have experience working with at-risk youth and also survivors of sex trafficking, and I graduated from Point Loma in 2018.
A little bit about me. My name is Vanessa, she, her, hers. I'm multi-generational Mexican and queer. I have my master's degree in social work and a background in inpatient psych and also in vocational rehab through the state of Ohio. So yeah, I've been doing this work for a little bit and have found this to be very rewarding, what I'm doing now.
Okay, so addressing increasing anxiety for BIPOC students. So we just want to take space and acknowledge that these past year and this current year has been a lot for everyone, especially for our BIPOC students. During the pandemic, most people feel really isolated and have been experiencing grief, loss, anxiety, uncertainty. And so definitely during this time, we have seen in the mental health space an increase of anxiety, stress, depression due to these variables and factors. Also, just as a whole, our communities have been witnessing police brutality, a rise in anti-Asian hate crimes, mass shootings, political unrest. There just have been so many instances within our atmosphere that have been hugely impacting our mental well-being. And so we just want to acknowledge and give space that this is a lot to process and hold and grieve. And so if your mental wellness has been affected by these things in this past year, you are not alone.
So I just wanted to read this quote from Psychology of Radical Healing Collective. So radical healing involves personal and collective actions that promote living a life with dignity and respect. Such a life necessitates freedom from all forms of oppression. And so now we're going to kind of move into a conversation around staying grounded and what it looks like maybe during these times. So when we think about self-care, I'll say it's a very Western construct, right? But its roots are actually something that really came to life during the civil rights movement and the women's rights movement. And so it's really actually this radical act of valuing yourself, engaging in an activity that takes care of your own mental, emotional, and physical well-being, right? And so I think it's so important to think about this a little bit more expansively because we don't just live and exist in self, we also exist in community, which is really important to think about. And community care specifically focuses on how we heal as a collective community. And not because it's coming from a space of like trying to save somebody, but because it's a community and we all deserve to feel safe and well.
So now I'm going to share a couple of self-care practices that BIPOC students can utilize and practice and incorporate in their lives. This is by no means like what you have to do, but these are just some pointers and some things that have been helpful for ourselves. So we'd like to share them with you. So first, setting boundaries is okay. I know it can be really hard sometimes to feel like you have to say yes to everyone, but it's okay to say no, set that boundary, do what's going to be good for your own mental well-being, and don't feel guilty. No. Also during this time, as I said before, you might be experiencing grief, loss, anger, really taking space to acknowledge those feelings and process them, either if it's with a friend, someone you trust, who your support system is, if your family, if that feels comfortable. If it doesn't, it's totally understandable as well. Or even seeking professional help as well. I know Point Loma has a wellness center, and so there are many people that you can talk to that you can process these things with. And acknowledging your feelings is really important because, as I mentioned, we are going through a lot. So take the time to do that. And then, yeah, lastly, reaching out to, professional help, someone for support. This can look like, as I mentioned, the wellness center or seeking services even outside of Point Loma's campus. And also, I'd like to add that if you are looking for a therapist and you have access to a therapist, then there's always space, especially as BIPOC students, to advocate for yourself and make sure you're finding someone that is a good fit for you, that's going to understand your cultural background, that's going to understand your perspective and really honor that. I know I have a lot of friends that have experiences with therapists that haven't always been great because they don't understand the layers of how racism plays into things, how white supremacy plays into things, how all these different cultural things could play into your mental health. And so really ask those questions when looking for a therapist or looking for someone to help you with your mental wellness if you're looking professionally.
And so we have a little list here that probably is by no means exhaustive, kind of like what Gabby was talking about earlier, right? But here's just like 5 ways is developing pride in your racial, ethnic, or indigenous groups that you're part of. Truthfully, research that's coming up now consistently shows that feeling a greater sense of pride in the cultural traditions or accomplishments of one's racial or ethnic group is linked to lower rates of depression and greater well-being for BIPOC people. So it's something to really take seriously in terms of just, fighting and combating depression. Secondly, might look like something like sharing your story. So many of our cultures, right, are rooted in storytelling or some levels of sharing stories through storytelling. So finding a person or people that you trust, that you can connect with and share your experiences, whether they be positive or challenging, can be really powerful. Something really beautiful too, or an idea with this is like asking your parents or grandparents to tell stories about what it was like for them growing up. So bringing in that intergenerational component. Also like resist and take action, right? So part of that includes educating yourself, possibly about some of the issues that are affecting your community. And then like taking it a step past that, like identifying with groups, local groups in your community who are maybe working towards addressing these issues. Because sometimes it can feel really overwhelming and very hopeless if you're not moving towards taking some level of action in efforts to create collective change. Fourth, maintaining radical hope, which is easier said than done, most definitely, but reflecting on the ways that your ancestors have survived. Like they've survived through some of the most difficult things like slavery, colonization, internment camps, detention centers. Their contributions to existing are just like a true testament to the fact that things can be different in the future, right? And lastly, practicing self-care. So there's so many ways to practice self-care. It's not always this commercialized image of what we now might think of it. community, right? That can include things like getting enough sleep or making sure that you go outside for a day, or even incorporating spiritual practices into your daily life. So those are just some examples there.
And now we're going to touch on a little community care practices. So some community care practices, we touched on a little bit of this already, but learning about your own culture's healing practices are huge in terms of getting in touch with like collective healing. So for example, a lot of us have like grandparents who have been doing, I don't know, whether it be like drinking tea, using herbal remedies, about how they would heal, and really honoring that and learning from that is really huge in terms of how we heal as a collective. And places are huge. Finding community that accepts you for who you are and supports you for who you are, who you could just be yourself with, where you feel like you're safe, is also huge. Creating a safety plan. This is more of like a mental health or is mental health specific community care practice. But if you're someone who is experiencing maybe a mental health issue and want just like community surrounding you with that issue, surrounding yourself with people and creating a plan with them to help to communicate with them, and also create a plan to help them advocate for yourself, and also creating a plan to help navigate whatever mental health issue that you're going through. So for example, like explaining like, if I am feeling really depressed one day and I'm kind of in like my room alone by myself, like I'm okay, or maybe I want like 2 people to text me to just check on me, see how I'm doing. Little things along those lines to communicate to your community how they can best support you. And then lastly, consider the safety of others. I know right now with the increase in anti-Asian hate crimes, and also just with like the recent Dante Wright incident, there are a lot of BIPOC folks and students who aren't feeling safe right now. And so if you have a friend who maybe is in a place or in a community that they don't feel super safe, like even if it's like opening up your home to them, or like dropping off groceries, because I know we're in COVID, or even like I've had friends who don't feel safe to like walk and do errands by themselves, so they'll have friends go along with them so that they're not alone and they feel supported and they feel like safe with doing like your everyday errands and things like that. So think of like creative ways that you can come and support your community around you.
So now we just wanted to share some resources, kind of just acknowledging we don't have tons of time, but yeah, we'll share with you what we got. If you want to turn this screen, Gabby. So we have listed on here calling 211. This is great for like any level of resource that you need, like food or housing assistance, just very great like general number. We also have the access and crisis line here, and an option for texting them as well. Trevor Project is specifically LGBTQ+, and also so is Trans Lifeline. And then we also have text talk with us in case you just want to like check in or talk with somebody. We have a National Suicide Prevention line. And then just more for collectiveness and community, the Gender Fluid Collective, which is a BIPOC specific org. Blackline is an unapologetically Black LGBTQ+ femi hotline that if you see things happening in your community and you're scared to call the cops, it's a great option. Homegirl help hotline, I think, does something similar, but also offers like support. So if you just want to talk with somebody, they're totally available for that too. We also have South Bay Community Services, and then 2 great Instagrams if you're interested in following, Asians for Mental Health and Decolonizing the Body, if you're interested in how trauma is stored within the body and moving through that. And then Gabby, maybe you want to share about the apps?
Yeah. We're looking also just for one of my favorite self-care practices, especially in this last year, has been meditation. And these are some 3 great apps that I really enjoy. Liberate is a meditation app made by people of color for people of color, and it's free. So I think that's a really good resource. I really like Shine as well. Shine is created by two Asian American women. This one has like a free version and then also a paid version. And then Calm is a great meditation app as well. And same with Shine, they have like a free version and a paid version. So yeah, those are some good resources. And here are our sources. And if you're interested in anything that we've mentioned or talked about and want to get in contact with us, you can email us here at nostigma@jfs.org. And also you can follow us on Instagram for self-care content, mental health content at bdb.sd. But thank you for having us today.
Thanks, everybody. It was great talking with you.
Amazing. Thank you both, Gabby and Vanessa, for just sharing that presentation with us and sharing some amazing practices and resources to utilize. We're going to now go into the Q&A portion. So if you have any questions about anything that's been presented or shown or any of your own questions, you can leave them down in the chat box and we will ask them. But I want to turn it over now and open it up to our panelists. And so I first want to ask a question to Eric. And, asking kind of Eric, you were recently a student here. If you could kind of walk us through a little bit of what your mental health journey has been like for you, and more so really like, what led you to find the mental health club on the Point Loma campus.
Hi, Bella. Great question. Let's see here. It's a long journey that I could talk about for hours and hours, but let's see here. Maybe started in 3rd grade when I was bullied as a kid for having alopecia areata, which is bald spots, which I no longer have. I was also moved from Minnesota to San Diego for my dad's job, and that was halfway through 3rd grade, which is not a good time if you remember back then when everyone had their little cliques and niche groups. And then throughout middle school, I was like this short, scrawny Asian kid that was like the perfect bully target because I was a kid that moved. I was really short. I still am short, but I'm not worried about that anymore. And high school was really difficult. I took 11 or 13 AP classes, just too many, which are college level courses in high school. And then I attended Purdue University, and then I got a concussion, which threw me off and was a whole nother discussion, but that triggered a lot of depression, anxiety in my sophomore year. So I dropped out of Purdue and then decided to transfer to Point Loma Nazarene, and then had a bout of depression, or several, and then went to the hospital a few times, but I'm getting a lot more care now, and certainly happy to have founded the Mental Health Awareness Club. That is something I'm probably most proud about my time at Point Loma. And let's see here. How did it start? I actually started with a complicated story where I was grappling with the administration on some mental health issues that I was experiencing. I was working with the wellness center, but it wasn't going great. There was a lot of back and forth talk on like staying at the school basically for having mental health issues and what that looks like. So then after a bunch of complicated stuff, I decided, hey, if I don't like the way things are running right now, maybe I can do something to change it. And I had the privilege of being able to do that. So in coordination with Dr. Chris Lambert, who is an RN and nurse teacher professor at Loma, we started the Mental Health Awareness Club, which is focused on the educational aspect. Because I'm not a mental health professional, I don't do it for work. I was just promoting awareness and creating a space on campus where people felt comfortable sharing their stories with each other. So that's the basic story, and then have since graduated, and I'm now grappling with speaking about mental health with my employer, which is a whole nother can of worms because that gets real complicated real quick. And something I actually have not brought up with many at my company. But about LOMA, Mental Health Awareness Club, very happy to have founded it. I'm actually curious on how that's going now. I contacted Dr. Lambert, but I think she got a new phone. So thanks, Bella.
Thank you. And so now I want to kind of open this up to all of our panelists and, ask you the question in terms of, we've seen so many resources and amazing practices, but for each of you individually, what have you found, in your own personal life to be some of the most helpful practices, when navigating your own mental health?
Yeah, I guess I can go first. For me, I thought it was really helpful. I've just been on and off in therapy for a long time at this point, but I started like a couple of sessions with a somatic practitioner, and really just this connection of mind body. For me personally, I found very helpful, like knowing that all the emotions that I had, my body could handle and could hold. And I think just like that, and also just really connecting with my ancestors on that like more like sort of spiritual level has been something that's felt really liberating for me too, to just kind of make me feel a little bit less alone, and to know that people have held parts of my journey too. So yeah, that's been really helpful.
I think for me personally, I like finding a routine, especially working from home right now, like finding like little routines for myself have really been great for my mental health and well-being. So whether that's like making matcha or tea in the morning and then doing stretches in order to like just making sure I'm like taking care of my body has been really good. Also kind of similar to what Vanessa mentioned, like finding a therapist that really worked well for me. Luckily, post college, I found someone who also was on a sliding scale, so that really helped out because therapy is very expensive. But actually now I'm also seeing someone who's more somatic focused, which is really cool in terms of connecting how your emotions connect to your body. And so that has been really cool for me. And then also like looking at Eastern healing practices as well. I just started doing acupuncture, and that's been really cool to kind of same with that mind body connection and seeing how just like a more holistic way of looking at your mental well-being.
Amazing, thank you.
And I'll chime in here real quick. I like to stay extremely active. I have my mountain bike back there. I rock climb, I scuba dive, and I do woodworking at a nonprofit, and I also volunteer at a robotics club. But that's extremely active, and I try to stay busy to distract myself from some of the issues that I face day to day. But I think getting distracted and being social while doing that is also helpful for me personally.
Yeah, thank you guys both. And I want to ask this next question to both Gabby and Eric. You've graduated from Point Loma and have gone on now. As you guys are reflecting, what are things that you wish would have been differently or maybe could be improved at Point Loma in terms of how we support students who are struggling with their mental health?
I can go first, Gabby. Okay. Let's see. In addition to well, I'll preface this by saying I also sat on a mental health task force, which was in coordination with the administration and a few members of faculty and myself and another student, dedicated to kind of figuring out what mental health resources, what additional resources could be allocated, or how could things change. One thing that I might even say or regret is that not following up on what happened to the Mental Health Awareness Club after graduation. I wish I had focused a little bit more on the continuity of care that would be happening as I transitioned and graduated. So looking back, that's one thing I would have done differently, is to focus on the transitioning of leadership for that club as I graduated.
I think for me personally, I know that unfortunately I did have a lot of friends who had really negative experiences with like the wellness center in terms of like experiences with therapists that weren't culturally prepared to handle students of color. And so I would really love just more focus on like cultural humility trainings or even just education in terms of learning about other cultures. I think this is also just a larger mental health issue in general about since mental health in America is predominantly focused on studied on white communities and really Western centric. There's a lot of exclusion towards BIPOC communities and LGBTQ plus community and the differences between the ways that our cultures experience mental health. And so I think that is something that, I mean, it's a larger issue, but it's something that Point Loma can work towards helping as well.
Amazing, thank you both. Another question we got was, how does your, and this is for all of you, how does your spiritual well-being relate to your mental well-being?
I can go first again. That's a complicated question. Before going to Loma, I was atheist, and then I decided to become Christian at Point Loma and have since decided to become agnostic. So it's a little bit complicated because I went to a church at Loma, outside of Loma, but while at Loma, that considered gayness a sin, and they always said stuff like hate the sin, love the sinner, which didn't really connect with what I personally believe. So that was damaging to my mental health. And in addition to a few other reasons, I decided to have since become agnostic, which is basically I'm not sure when it comes to religion. So it's been I've had a negative experience with that one church, and it's unfortunate that that happened, but it did affect my mental health in a negative way, having that negative experience with that church. Not saying that I had many positive experiences with that church as well.
Yeah, I think I can talk. For me personally too, like your spiritual well-being definitely has a connection to your mental well-being and mental and emotional well-being as well. Just for me personally, like a little bit more about my background. While I was at Point Loma, and even just my upbringing, grew up in a very like conservative Christian space, but have now really evolved my beliefs to hold more. I still consider myself of like being a Christian, but I hold very different and progressive beliefs now. And I think that was huge on my own mental well-being too, because being in more conservative spaces previously, I've had a huge mental health impact / spiritual impact, because I felt like my identity as a woman and my ethnicity being Japanese wasn't recognized and seen to the full extent of being a Japanese American. And so, and also just kind of similar to what Eric was saying, I saw how the spaces that I was a part of treated queer folks and treated non-able-bodied folks. And so that was huge in terms of my own and my own spiritual journey of like coming to peace with my beliefs, and then therefore having more peace in my mental well-being as well.
Yeah, thank you both for sharing that. I think for me, I grew up in a Catholic church. I think like a lot of like Latino folks are. And I feel very fortunate that my mom had so many traumatic experiences in the Catholic Church that like I wasn't forced to go, because truthfully, right, like especially at that time, that wouldn't have been a super safe space for me as a queer person. And I still hold on, I think, to a little bit of that. And so I know that that's an area for me to grow in as a human. And so for me, it almost felt like it was always like a no on religion. And then as I've gotten older and moved into myself, it's been more, less about organized religion and more about like my ancestors and thinking about ways that I'm protected beyond this world by people who share parts of my DNA with them or not, or, so for me, it's evolved and has been helpful in terms of my mental health. So I'm not feeling alone all the time, in this way.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing. I think such a great variety of perspectives is amazing too to see, because there's, students and whoever who are like navigating that all in their own pathway as well. So that's so helpful. Another question we have was, how has, if you've, experiencing racial prejudice, racism, microaggressions, whatever that has looked like for you in terms of your journey while at school, how has that impacted you more so in terms of your mental health? And that can be in a direct practicality way or, whatever way that you've seen it impact you most. And whoever wants to start can start first.
Can you say the question one more time? It's like how your experiences on campus and with like racism or microaggressions impact your mental health?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I can just start if that's okay. I know I just talked, so I'll try not to take up too much space, but I feel like truthfully, a lot of my academic experience, whether that be at any institution, I've been to a variety. I've got my bachelor's in Cal State LA and my master's at Ohio State. So I would say it felt like I had to go into hiding a lot and to sort of wash down myself to fit like frameworks or modalities of what I was being taught in school. Just, yeah, feeling like I had to shrink a little bit of myself, specifically as it relates to, my being Mexican, because that's just a thing. And then in graduate school, I truly was the only Mexican person there. And so that was really isolating and it felt very lonely. But I did make some really wonderful friends, and it's really about creating those safe spaces for yourself that really helped get me through it.
I can speak as well on this one. I think when I first went to Point Loma, it was honestly a little bit of a culture shock for me. My freshman year, I was the only Asian person in my whole entire hall of 32 girls, and probably like one of 4 in the whole entire dorm. So it's a huge adjustment. And the community that I grew up in was, I had a good Asian community where I grew up in LA. And so coming to a predominantly white campus and institution was like huge. And I think it really forces myself personally, but then also I know from my other friends of who are also people of color, just this huge pressure to assimilate and really fit in, even if it's not necessarily what you would normally do. But well, when you're like, 18, 19, and like you just want people to like you. But then I realized a lot of my early college years was like denying my culture and denying like part of who I am, because I was really trying so hard to fit into white spaces. Also, I was on campus during the 2016 election, and that was rough. Just hearing just some of the instances that happened to students of color on campus, and like racial slurs that were being said, and just different things along those lines, like that takes a toll on your mental health to not feel like you're safe on your campus. And so I think there's a lot that students of color experience, and myself included, whether it be on campus or even in classroom settings, because sometimes even professors make comments too. And so I think that definitely has this, it just continually makes you feel ostracized, and then makes you feel like even more anxious or stressed, or just so many other layers that you have to navigate as a student of color on a college campus.
Thank you, Gabby and Vanessa, for those wonderful responses. I'll add on by saying that I grew up in a white suburb south of the Twin Cities in Minnesota. There was two other Asian children with me. And I actually didn't sense any racism within my peers, which is really phenomenal up until third grade, like I said. And then upon coming to San Diego, there's a much larger Asian American community where I felt a lot of pressure to be something that I am not. And that is the kid who decides to do advanced math, like, I don't know, AP calculus in ninth grade, and walking from middle school to high school just to take an algebra 2 or something. And then it's just ridiculous. And now I'm an engineer because, you know, my dad and my mom would say, hey, you need to pick a career, like, and my dad is an engineer and my mom is a doctor. And then my sister decided to be a doctor as well. So it kind of was a natural flow towards this little box that you don't want to be in, or maybe you don't feel like you've made the choice to be in that box. It's being like in a survival mode where you're in that one little box and that's the only way you can survive. That's a really, really difficult thing to deal with when it comes to mental health on top of all that survival. So yeah, thank you for the question. That was a great question.
I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. But I wanted to ask, so for Gabby and Vanessa, one of our questions is, how do families of color normally receive your services? Do you feel like those families are open to the so-called labels that comes with mental health concerns?
I can speak for my own Asian American community, and I feel like there's still, unfortunately, a lot of stigma in terms of talking about mental health issues. But also it's really hard too, because it's not only that there's stigma talking about mental health issues, but in a lot of our native languages, the Western terms for like depression, anxiety, PTSD don't translate into our native languages. So a lot of times it's not only that there's stigma surrounding these concepts, but it's also that the Western ways that we talk about mental health don't translate. So I think those are two things that I like to think about when working with like Asian families and talking with Asian parents and Asian children. And I think for talking about mental health, thinking about sometimes ways that you can maybe not necessarily using the term even depression, but sometimes even talking about the symptoms surrounding it instead, really helps to like, what's it called? Make it just, then since there's just so much stigma even just around the word depression, if you talk about like the symptoms around it, then that kind of helps to ease it and make it more like approachable. And I think that's something that I've seen. And also just figuring out ways that if like, say you're talking to your parent who maybe doesn't speak English, then try to figure out a way to communicate the mental health concept in a way that maybe even if it's using metaphors, but just in a way that they'd understand, like really taking that cultural lens in that aspect is something that I think about a lot.
That's super awesome. Thanks for sharing all that, Gabby. I think for me, so something that's challenging, and I can super relate to Eric when you were talking about this, I was like that for sure, like how we get placed into these little boxes. So, right, we even do it on a systematic level. So part of me has a hard time answering this question because I'm the LGBTQ plus outreach coordinator. And so I am put or placed into this box, but like, where does my intersection get to exist? So like, for me, like, I can't be in every space to honor that, but things that I've heard from my teammates who are talking to folks from diverse communities is that really just holding the space to share and talk as a collective is truly healing. It is truly like something that brings us together in a really deep way. And you don't have to say, I'm talking about mental health right now in order to do that, right? It's just something that we naturally do, and that's so beautiful. But I will also say there is still a lot of stigma. And what if we, just as Gabby was saying, changed our language, totally changed the system and the way that we're approaching it to really just meet people where they want to be met at. And maybe therapy is a really great, useful tool for a lot of families. And maybe it's not for some. And, you know, it's really like, how do we decentralize this limited frame of how we even think about getting mental health services?
Yeah, thank you. Eric, I have a question. What advice do you have for students who feel the pressures from parents to be something they are not?
Oh my goodness, that is a great question. I'm assuming this would be for Loma students. Well, let me think. I am not sure I'm 100% the best person to ask for that question, but if I were to say, what should I, well, I'm physically located in my cabin apartment studio in Serra Mesa, which is close to Qualcomm Stadium. So I'm physically separated in terms of my living space from my parents. That's been helpful because they live about 25 minutes north in Rancho Penasquitos, so I can go visit them anytime I want to. But being able to have a healthy physical distance and relationship has been very beneficial for me. I'm assuming, well, I moved back into my parents' home after college to save money, and then that was actually really difficult. Working from home and living with your parents 24/7 was extremely difficult because I adjusted from the college culture back to my home culture. And I'm assuming studying from home has been just difficult as well. I'm sure there are many physical, like monetary barriers to finding your own place, but that has been the single best boost to my mental health, is having that physical distance without sacrificing the love and care that they provide.
Amazing, thank you. Before we end, we actually want to do a poll on behalf of Gabby and Vanessa that they are going to share, and then I will throw it back to Sam and we will be ending. So I think we are sharing that in the chat right now. Yes. So if you guys can just take a moment to click on that poll and fill that out. And as you do so, I want to thank our panelists and their wise words of encouragement, and encourage them all to utilize the resources that have been presented here if you have any questions for them. And then I'm going to throw it back to Sam.
Thank you, Bella. Thank you, everyone. And I don't know, Kim maybe can come back on and we can end this. We so appreciate everything that these panelists have taught us today. Thank you to Bella. Thank you to Eric. Thank you to Vanessa, and thank you to Gabby. We are so excited to hear your heart and your voice in this situation. Before I kind of turn it over to Kim, one of the things I want to share with you, as we do at every Cup of Culture, this is being recorded and will be made available when it's ready. You're also going to get an email, I believe, with some resources that will help you after this. Now, we always say this, that this is not the ending of this conversation. Mental health concerns are here to stay. And with the issues going on around the world and in our very own country, I want you to know that you can always find help right here on this campus. So for our students, some of the resources we have is the Wellness Center. If you ever need help with anything, please reach out to them. We also have our campus pastors in our spiritual development. They're here to help. Just reach out and someone will be able to sit down with you and kind of walk you through. Now, when people hear campus pastors and they hear pastors, they normally think, they're gonna try and get me to be a Christian, and that's not necessarily what they're there for. They're here to listen. They're here to guide you through whatever is on your heart. So reach out and please do not sit alone thinking no one cares. There's a lot of resources on our campus. There's a lot of people, your professors, your faculty, staff, everyone here care about your well-being. We want you to know that we care about the wholeness of you as a student. So that's what we want to support you with. So I want to kick it over to Kim and close this out.
Sure. Thank you, Sam. Yeah, I just want to say, I know Gabby had to leave because she had another engagement, but super proud of Gabby. I was hoping we'd have time, but maybe in another setting. When Gabby was an intern for me at the Center for Justice and Reconciliation, she was really coming to terms with the experience that her grandparents had in the Japanese internment camps. And the fact that she and I could relate to this, were raised in a school system that didn't talk about that, and the deep impact that had on her family's history. And so was really proud to have Gabby on this event tonight. Actually talked to her about it about a year ago when I was first sharing with her what Sam and I were cooking up this year, and saying, I really hope there's a place for you to come back as an alum. I think it's really powerful to have our alums come back and share some of their experience, both on campus, but also out in the work world. And I know that Gabby came into this evening with a real desire that the students who are attending would feel heard and would feel seen. And I told her, I know that will happen because of your vulnerability. And I feel the same way about you, Eric and Vanessa. I'm really grateful to you for being willing to share. Both Eric and Gabby, as alums of this university, it might sometimes feel more difficult to share the truth of your experience, and not always the shiny package, that the reality of how all of us navigate mental health challenges is sometimes pretty messy and we can do better. And so I think that's what Sam and the team at the CJR and at SAM Center, that we are committed to, talking about these wedge issues and acknowledging that we can do better. So hearing from you, Eric and Gabby, about your experiences is a really important part of that. And then Vanessa too, thank you for your vulnerability and not just coming to us as experts and subject matter experts, but also as people who have navigated their own journeys. I think that probably one of the biggest pieces of setting down the stigma is being willing to talk about our own experiences, and that most of us struggle with mental health challenges. So thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to end a little bit early tonight, which is great. And we are just really thankful for those of you who chose to spend some time with us this evening. We will, like Sam mentioned, be following up with a pretty extensive list, sharing the resources that were shared tonight by Vanessa and Gabby, and also some additional resources. I want to give a shout out to Loma Outside. Eric talked a lot about how he stays really physically active, and Loma Outside is a great way to plug in and get involved in activities that get you out in this beautiful nature and this incredible campus that we live on or near. And so we will share the link to that in our follow-up email, but there are a couple of ongoing programs like weekly yoga and some like run and chat events. And so Loma Outside is another great way to get involved, both to meet people, but also just to get your body moving. I know that I've been doing some work around breaking the stress cycle. And there's a lot of research to show that we have to actually communicate to our bodies that we're stopping the stress that we live under. And we can't just tell our minds that. We have to actually break the cycle, and physical activity is one of the best ways to do that. So just a little shout out there to Llama Outside. And with that, we will wrap tonight. Thank you for taking this poll for Vanessa and Gabby. It's only 2 questions, takes you less. They are really appreciating the feedback that we can give them about the information that they provided. So thank you, all of our panelists tonight, for taking the time and the vulnerability to speak to us about mental health. And we are looking forward, like Sam said, to continuing this conversation and continuing to elevate voices on campus that can talk openly and freely about the fact that we are whole beings. And that means we come with emotions and challenges that sometimes leave us in situations that can make us feel on the edge and on the margins. And we want to improve that here on campus. So thank you for being here tonight and for your time. And we look forward to seeing you next month for our last Cup of Culture. It is going to be a great conversation, a really challenging conversation around housing instability and how that impacts college students. And we do have college students that experience homelessness, lack of housing, or just the instability of a safe place to live. And so we're going to be diving into that next month and looking at how that impacts college students, and then how our students of color are often disproportionately impacted by the barrier of stable housing also. So we hope you'll join us for that one next month. And then we're looking forward to kicking off another year next year of great conversation. So thanks for joining us tonight.